hello and welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast. Joining me as usual, I've got Rohan. Good morning, Rohan. Thank you for waking up.
Good morning. I pretty much didn't until I got woken up this morning, so.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's good.
Joining us today, we have Marc from the UK. Hey, Marc. Welcome.
Hey, Phil. Hey, Rohan.
This episode is sponsored by Home Assistant Cloud by Nabu Casa. Easily access your local Home Assistant instance remotely for a small monthly fee that supports the Home Assistant project. Configuration is done by the user interface, so there's no fiddling with any router settings, SSL certificates, or any YAML.
Marc, whereabouts in the UK are you from?
I'm from Bicester in the UK, so around about the centre of the UK, really. Just moved around about a year ago, so was a bit further down, now a little bit further up.
Nice.
Thanks for taking the time to come on and talk about your Home Assistant journey. I guess that we can just dive right into it and sort of give us like a background on how you started using Home Assistant.
Well, I came across it by chance, really. I imagine like a lot of people do. I was working with someone at the time and they mentioned this Home Assistant and they knew that I liked technology. So I was like, okay, I'll have a little look. And I didn't actually really do anything with it for a month or two. When I revisited it, they mentioned it again. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll have a play. And I really liked it. And funnily enough, the person who introduced me to it stopped using it and didn't really carry on with it. But I really took to it and, haven't looked back since, really.
That's funny. Why did they stop using it?
I don't know, actually. I think it was time, It takes up a lot of time, doesn't it?
They just kind of got over it.
Yeah, basically, yeah. But, it did take up a lot of my time. Well, it still does, I guess, really. Like I'm sure it does you guys.
Yeah.
There's always one thing, right? It's never ending, right? Like there's always something. I actually, just before we jumped on this call, I was installing a new theme on my Home Assistant and I was just playing around with it. And then I looked at the time, I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to be late. Like there's always something to play around with, right?
Yeah. It takes up, too much time, maybe the missus would say, but she's very understanding.
That's good. Yeah, it's again, it is one of those things which there's a lot of care and feeding, but if you like it, it's good, right? So
yeah, and I think it is one of those things that evolves as well, isn't it? You start off small and then you're like, oh, I'll bolt this on, I'll add this on, I'll do this, I'll do that. And before you know it, it's become a complex beast that only really you understand. So I think it's then trying to trim it back down again as well, really, isn't it? To make it actually usable for everyone in your household.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't bothered with the trimming down yet, but yes, the rest of it, I completely agree. So how long have you been into home automation? Like was Home Assistant your first kind of entry into it, or did you do a bunch of stuff before, or just like even like little things like just doing stuff on the Amazon Echo and stuff like that, or like how did that come about?
I'd say not a huge amount really. Actually, I used IFTTT for a little bit, played around, but only had a couple of automations on there really. It was fairly limited. I would say that probably the strength of the IFTTT was that you could give it custom commands, so that you didn't have to say to Google, can you open this app and do this? You could just say a command. So I used that. But actually before that, I used something called X10. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Probably X10,
25 years ago now, maybe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I did have some of those things. My parents were also very understanding, and I had, I think, a couple of sockets and a couple of lights and a remote by the bed, and obviously thought that was super cool, that I could turn the lights on and off by the bedside.
Did you have the physical cog on each device, like to change the house code, like A, B, C, D? And then you'd have like a sub house code that you have to change with like a little screwdriver. Did you have that on your devices on X10?
Yes, I did actually. Yeah. There was a lot more codes than I thought it needed, given that there wasn't really anyone using it.
I think they just imagined that, this X10 thing, like it's going to take off, right? And every neighbor's going to have X10 in their house. It's going to conflict everywhere, or there's going to be an apartment building. But in reality, I don't think, it's only unless you're in this home automation bubble that people really know what X10 is, right? I doubt those house codes would have really conflicted.
Yeah, I think you're right. I have actually still got a couple of things somewhere, because when I was sorting out the house when we moved, I'd found out that one of the batteries was still in the remote, and obviously it corroded and got everywhere. So,
Yeah.
so then I did have to chuck that away.
That's funny.
That's annoying.
So that's a flashback from the past. But yeah, I don't use that anymore, obviously. And it was just IFTTT. I did have a look at a couple of other apps, out there that are similar. I'm not sure if it's Yonomi or something like that. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. But again, it's limited to what you've got, and it uses the cloud, obviously, doesn't it? Like most of them do. So
right.
I wanted to get away from the cloud, really, and that was one of the big things. As soon as I saw that Home Assistant not only was local, but already had so many integrations to things, I was like, this is perfect. This is what I'd been looking for and didn't realize it.
It's I don't know. It's one of those things, right? Again, just like you said, there's no cloud. There's no bunch, there's not a lot of, craziness going on with Home Assistant, but then you plug it in and it just kind of works, right? And there's just a bunch of stuff that shows up, right? And it's like, okay, cool. And then from there you can start going on and you can build as it needs.
Yeah, well, I think it's come such a long way as well, hasn't it? I mean, I've been using it for probably just under 3 years now, something like that, I think.
Yeah.
And at the time, I suppose it was a bit of a barrier for some people because some areas, were quite technical.
Yeah.
But now it's so plug and play to the extent where you can get something up and running in 20 minutes on it, can't you? From flashing the SD card to getting a few things connected, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the user friendliness of Home Assistant is coming a long way, and I think it's this year in particular, we're going to see that just jump even further.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I remember the States UI, and I think that was fairly basic then, really, wasn't it? And
you had to use the purpose of groups was to be able to make the States UI look nice, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be honest, I didn't really use it much then because of that, maybe. I mean, you had to do everything, obviously, in YAML. And I think also you had to restart some parts of Home Assistant for even the UI changes to take effect. Whereas now you don't think about changing the Lovelace UI, do you? And it's just there straight away.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's the good old days. but that's it, right? I mean, it's kind of that evolution of the product, right?
So Mark, you've started off with X10 and you've gone to, was it Yonomi? Is that what it's called?
I looked at that for a while. Yeah, it's an app on your phone which integrates to things, but I haven't looked at those since.
Have you moved on to any other protocols now? Like are you running any like Zigbee stuff around the house, like Philips Hue, or what's your when you're looking for a device? What's your go-to?
Well, I would say the Xiaomi things have become a massive part of my ecosystem. Really, they were so cheap, but they weren't just cheap. The quality seems to be there as well, and they look nice. So it's the key things, isn't it? Aesthetics, functionality, and price, and it's kind of got all of those really. So I've got probably about 60 Zigbee devices, I would say, with Xiaomi.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the other devices are Wi-Fi devices, really. So, Sonoffs and Shellys. Yeah, there's probably a good 50 or so of those as well. They just add up again. I mean, if you asked me where they were, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
I'm guessing a whole bunch of door sensors and window sensors that you just forget about, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But they all still have their uses. You just forget about it, which I suppose is a good way to have it, right? Where something just works and you forget that it's even there.
Yeah, definitely.
I think probably the best part of Xiaomi, which is an interesting one, because a lot of people use the combi sticks, don't they? And the Zigbee MQTT. Mm-hmm. Whereas I actually use the gateways that the original Xiaomi gateways.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I actually have that in the cupboard somewhere. It didn't last long. I think I bought it because I just assumed that it's the Xiaomi Zigbee gear. I better buy the gateway. But then I got a bit weirded out by it. You have to configure it and it talks Chinese to you. And then I was like, do I really want this sitting on my Wi-Fi network? Like, what's the Chinese government, going to do with this sort of thing? So it didn't last long in my house. Did you have it blocked
interesting.
from the internet, or do you have it open still?
So I invested in the Unify stuff, and I've got it all segregated across VLANs, and so they can't talk out to the internet. In fact, if anyone has problems with them, what I found was, instead of actually blocking the traffic to them, you can do a reject instead. So it basically, instead of dropping the packets, actually tells the device that the packets have been rejected. And the reason I did that was because I found that sometimes they were rebooting themselves and some of the sensors were not triggering immediately. So, the PIRs were taking a while to respond or what have you. So that solved the problem for me, at least.
So so maybe they must be smart enough to think, okay, I'm not getting an internet connection. I might need a new DHCP lease or something. Just reboot and start again. Try and get an internet connection. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that's it. So the reason I went for them actually was because it wasn't just so that they could act as gateways for the Zigbee devices. So the original ones, at least, I think the new ones don't have it anymore, but they've got a light on and they've got, they can create sounds as well. So it actually is quite a big part of our setup. So we've got 4 gateways and we have one on each floor, and then one in the garage as well. And they act as doorbells so that we can hear it, throughout the whole house. And also, if I'm out in the garage doing some DIY or what have you, can hear the doorbell still as well.
Yeah, interesting idea.
So the gateway hardware itself has a speaker in it.
Yeah, it's got a little speaker and a light in it.
Yeah.
I have seen those. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so it's handy for that, and it's also handy. So for the light, basically, we use that as the night light on each landing. Mm-hmm. So at night time, we don't actually use the main lights at all, apart from, in the main rooms like the lounge. We just use those gateways. So if you get up in the night or what have you, then the PIRs detect you're about and the lights on the gateways go off instead. So it was a way of solving, instead of having dimmable lights and things like that and setting different brightnesses at different times, we just use the gateways.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Sense.
Yeah.
How do you trigger the gateways when a doorbell's activated? Or what, have you a smart doorbell that Home Assistant talks to?
So I just kept it simple, really. The Xiaomi buttons that you can get, the battery-powered circular ones. So I've just got one of those stuck on the door, and the missus says, look, it needs to be discreet. So I put it on the door and it blended in with the white door frame. But unfortunately, it blends in so well that a couple of people don't even notice it's there.
Yeah.
You sort of need to get like a little bell sticker to stick on it so it looks like a doorbell or something.
Yeah, make it less discreet.
Yeah, people have got used to it now, though, because we have a lot of the same delivery men. But so it just has a multi-purpose, really. So that's why I like the gateways. But I can understand why others, would go down the other route, especially if you can't block the internet traffic to it. Then you would probably want something else.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use the Xiaomi gateway? Like, have you set up the automation for that, doorbell in the Xiaomi gateway itself, or does it all go through Home Assistant and do the automations through there?
Yeah, it all goes through Home Assistant. Yeah, you're right. The gateways can do it themselves, can't they? But I had problems, I think, probably because the internet was blocked, that it didn't always work properly. And I wanted central control anyway.
I think you have to use the app to build the automations, right? So if this doesn't have internet access, then you can't really create automations on there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, because you can't get into the app to access the devices when they haven't got the internet. So, so that's quite tricky. But I don't actually do it in Home Assistant as such, to be honest with you. I make really heavy use of Node-RED. So so I'm a Node-RED man, and obviously, thankfully, because the add-on's so great with Home Assistant, it works so well, and the WebSocket between the two is seamless, really. So I don't really see any delays, in automations triggering or anything. Obviously, a lot of techies like to have the sort of YAML automations in Home Assistant. But I think even if you're technical, being able to see the flows in there and, the visualizations really helps to see what's going on and what might be going wrong with your automations.
Sure.
So I think they're a good pairing.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, it's effective, right? Then at that point, then why bother? But so what's your and this is something Phil and I have gone back on quite a bit, is from a Node-RED. Do you like that flow kind of diagram? Is it like how does it differ to you? Is it just in the YAML side, like the logic is it just too cumbersome? Like is that like what's the need for the extra plugin?
I would say probably it's because it's come a long way in terms of automations in Home Assistant, hasn't it? Let's be honest. So 3 years ago, doing automations in there did have a bit of a ceiling, and some things were either very difficult to do or you couldn't really do through an automation. You know, the conditional logic would get so complicated. So I would say, you could do most of them with the automations in Home Assistant now, but because I already went that route, you know, I've stuck with that.
Yeah. No, that's
so
fair.
Do you guys use Node-RED, or do you do all the automations in Home Assistant?
It's funny because Rohan and I were talking about this on the last episode, and I actually have I really like every time that someone suggests Node-RED, I always I think it must be my developer brain. I just can't get my head around how things work in Node-RED, like having to do all the flows. Like I've got, you just described the big conditional blocks in YAML and it gets crazy. I have those, right? And I'm comfortable with those. I can see how it works. But just me thinking about trying to put that into a flow and clicking and dragging things in Node-RED, it would take me all day to do something I could do in 2 minutes in YAML, if that makes sense.
I
That's
think
really interesting, because I kind of think of it as the opposite sometimes now. I go, right, I just need to do this. I'll just drag a box here, drag a box there, and it's done.
Yeah. I think ideally for me, we would have that like same Node-RED type of functionality within Home Assistant, right? Rather than it being an external app. So I do use the built-in automation engine, but I don't completely disagree with you, Marc, especially when you're using like the templating engine and like a bunch of stuff layered on there. It does get pretty complicated, right? But I think for me, it's just more than that. I don't want another thing to manage, which is a big reason why I don't use Node-RED. Right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think if you had to run it on a separate system as well, I wouldn't have gone there, because, like you say, the more things you've got, right, the more things to go wrong, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I try and have everything on the same system. So if I talk about what Home Assistant's running on, for example, I've put it all on an Intel NUC. And so everything that communicates with each other is internal, if you see what I mean. So, it hasn't got to go over the Wi-Fi to get to this, because then there's always a risk, that it's not going to work, isn't there?
Yeah. I mean, or just, having to maintain, don't upgrade this past version, whatever, and then upgrade that to whatever else, right? And I mean, we saw the security bulletins come out for Home Assistant, things like that, and then having to deal with the dependencies, essentially, is what, I mean, I do already deal with some, but I don't know that I want to deal with more, right?
Yeah, because I mean, the add-ons can obviously stack up quite quickly as well, can't they? I'm sure you've probably got a good 20 or so different components in there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's enough. There's a lot of files.
So you've got your NUC running. So what did size, like how big of the Intel NUC have you got? Have you got like a fancy NUC? Have you got like the base model?
No, I went pretty base, really. So I've got an Intel NUC i3, and I put VMware ESXi host on it, so it's virtualized. So I've got Home Assistant running on one VM on it, and then I've got another Windows VM, which is running Blue Iris for the camera software.
Yeah.
But the great thing is, as well, is you can spin up another one for Home Assistant, and use it as your dev instance. So I've got 2 dev instances on there now, and nice. I've become a bit more disciplined about deploying things. So before, you would just change things on the fly and go, oh, well, sorry, this isn't going to work for 10 minutes. But I've found now that, the missus might get a bit angry if things stop working all the time, It's, oh, sorry, I'm just playing with this. So I do tend to test it out on dev now, and then at night time when she's in bed or what have you, move it across to the live version.
That's interesting. So how do you manage your test environment? sort of, for example, like if I'm running my production environment here, I'm connected to my Z-Wave network, I'm connected to my Zigbee network, and all the cloud instances. Spinning up another Home Assistant instance and then testing things isn't really ideal because the Zigbee network, the Z-Wave network are running in production. Like, how do you have like a test suite, or have you got like fake entities that you're running in a test environment to sort of trick those automations that you're working on?
Well, I've got some spare devices, so I have a few spare buttons, and a few spare door sensors, and then you can just get them to talk to the same gateway. So I'll still use the same production gateway, but the dev instance can talk to that as well. And then you just use the test button, say, to try something out, and then just change the code once you're ready and say, right, well, now it's this button, that's by the bedroom lamp or what have you.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
So changing gears a little bit, how do you drive a lot of your automations and things like that? Is it just mostly again, automated, or do you trigger it using like some kind of tactile like buttons or NFC tags or something like that, or do you just use Amazon Echoes, Google Homes? How do you do that?
I would say the main way we use it is through the Google Homes, actually. We've probably got 6 or 7 of those scattered around the house, in different rooms. And yeah, that's a big part of our life, actually. I mean, to the point where if we go to friends' houses, we'll go to say do something and forget that, that isn't even there. I'm sure you guys have probably done that as well.
Yeah, once, twice.
Yeah, just once or twice.
It's quite strange, really. And obviously we haven't got one in every room, and I've certainly been in other rooms, where we haven't got one, and you go to say something and don't realise it's not there to listen to you,
Yeah.
So I've got it linked up actually through the integration that's available in Home Assistant. So that was probably one of the first things I did, which was obviously quite daunting. If you guys have ever tried it, with the SSL certificates and various other configurations you have to do, and go into the Google console and create a new app. But it was worth it, and it stood the test of time. I would say the only thing I've really changed on it is I used to use DuckDNS for the routing for it. But when you become so dependent on it for your daily life, you need it to be super reliable. And I found that DuckDNS, unfortunately, it's great service and it's free, but it did sometimes have some minor outages. So I changed to my own SSL certificate on my own domain, and it's been rock solid since. And touch wood, that's what I still use.
Nice. Okay. Do you use Let's Encrypt or anything like that, or you just use your straight up? You just bought a certificate that's signed?
Yeah, I just bought a certificate.
Nice.
I can't remember, off some website where it was cheaper than normal. And so I just do that. And then we've got quite a lot of scripts in there because, you can add lights and plugs, obviously, but you can also add scripts through Home Assistant as well. And then Google Home will just activate those scripts. So we've probably got 100 or so different routines in Google.
Oh, wow.
For different things that trigger different scripts. And that's the way we do most things. So for the lights, for example, we don't even really say turn on the light or turn off the light. We'll just say light and it will toggle the light because Google can't do toggling by default.
Interesting. Okay. So you have those maps. So you have specific commands that are mapped to specific scripts, so on and so forth. And then how do you keep track of what does what?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, you've got to try and keep it as simple as possible. So although I've got like 100 or so in there, I've got them standardized across rooms. So say, for example, if you've got a lamp and a light in each room, with the default Google, if you say turn on the light, for example, it will turn all the lights on in that room, which is quite frustrating. So what I've got is I've got an entity called light and an entity called lamp in each room, and then a routine linked to that, so that basically whatever room you're in, you can either say light or lamp, and then the script will figure out which light or lamp you mean that you want to turn on.
Interesting. And you also do that based on what room or which Google Home is inputting or is picking up that.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, so Google Homes are clever enough to know which room you're in, and then it will trigger the entity for that specific room. So use that quite a lot. So I've got some notifications where I'll ask, for example, I'll say solar voltage, and then for that Google Home, it'll announce through and say, right, you're currently generating 2 kilowatts and the battery voltage is 26 volts or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Very cool.
That's very interesting. Okay. And are they natural language? Like, is it, what is the solar voltage? Or is it, literally just a little phrase like solar voltage?
Well, we keep it short and sweet. Yeah, it's not very natural. I suppose you could do it either way, but, the Googles and the Echoes really have still got a bit of a way to come, haven't they? I'm sure everyone's shouted at theirs from time to time that it doesn't, understand what you're saying. So we've just learnt to do them. I mean, there's only 2 of us in our house, so we can do that. But I imagine, if you've got children and guests all the time, then, you'd need them a bit more friendly.
Yeah. So it's a good way to teach your kids to say please and thank you too.
So that's the main way. And then I would say, other than that, we do use the companion app as well. I mean, the Android companion app is fantastic, and it's really come a long way, hasn't it? In probably only 9 months or so.
Yeah.
Like, remember, I think, we were talking about this all the time. I think you had the iOS app, and I was always like, you don't need an Android app. You've got HTML, like, just add it as a shortcut. You can do HTML, push notifications. Like, there's no need for an Android app. That's why no one's bothered to create an Android app. But now, like, I couldn't live without it. Like, the notifications from the app in Android, are infinitely better, right? Like, being able to have actionable notifications and images in those notifications, it's much better.
Yeah, well, and there's all the presence data and all of that stuff too, right? So now you don't need a separate presence sensor.
Charging state, is my phone charging? Is it discharging? What's the battery level? Yeah,
it is fantastic. I actually stayed on, like you said, the Chrome website version for quite a while. Until I realised how far along it was coming, and then I quickly swapped, and I think week on week I was seeing 5-10 new sensors at a time. So that's one thing I probably haven't really made good use of yet. I've got a Lovelace view where it's got all of the sensors on for my phone, but I haven't really made good use of them yet. I don't know if you guys have got any cool automations off the back of them.
Around the phone itself and the state of the phone.
Yeah.
I think mine are just pretty basic. Like I do use both of our phones as sensors, right? In terms of, are you home, are you away? And then there's most of my automations actually rely on presence, or not most. I guess some of my automations rely on presence, but outside of that, I haven't done. I have wanted to do quite a bit of the directional ones, right? It's like, hey, you left the work zone and now you're heading towards
the home zone,
right? And except I work remote, and I even though I do have access to an office, I almost never go. Right? So it's like,
Rohan's
and
heading
now
from the basement to the bedroom. Quick, turn on the
exactly.
AC.
It looks like he's going up the stairs, right? And it's like, so there have been some things I did want to do, I just never did. But yeah, it's primarily I just use it as a sensor.
I think I added my first automation just this week, actually, and it was there's sometimes I'll go to bed before my wife, and I've been putting little NFC stickers around my whole house, right? Like, I've got it on my fan, on my desk. I've just got, and I'm just going around the house tapping things. I love them. And I thought, I'll just put one on my bedside table so that if I'm going to bed first and my wife is staying up, the house will at least keep the bedroom lights off so that when she walks into the bedroom, it doesn't turn on and I get woken up and get grumpy. But then I thought, well, hang on, my phone, if I put my phone down on charge, Home Assistant can actually see that I put my phone on charge. So I've just added an automation that if the TV in the living room is still on, and I put my phone on charge, then the house will know, all right, Phil's gone to bed, turn off the bedroom lights and don't turn them back on if motion's detected.
Yeah, that's good. And it's quite instant as well now, isn't it? It knows straight away that it's gone on charge. I think you can also differentiate between wireless and wired. So if you've got different setups around the house, you can maybe even take advantage of that. Unfortunately, we've got wireless in most places, but it's definitely something I've considered.
Yeah, definitely. So what would be one of your favorite automations? Like, what is if you think about, I want to show something off to my friends, what is that automation or script you set up in your house that you just like, yeah, this is awesome?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, there's a few. I would say one obscure one is a good one to talk about, is the meat sensor. So
Okay.
I bought one of those meat sensors, where you stick it in a chicken or something like that and put it in the oven and it tells you what temperature it is. And I took that thermistor from there and I wired it up to, I can't remember if it was an ESP8266 or ESP32 now, one of those two anyway. And I got the calculations off the internet of how you convert resistance into temperature, etc. And then I linked that into Home Assistant. I can't remember if I used Tasmotor or I think it might have been an Arduino script I had to create for this one. But once I'd done that, then I could hook it into Google as well and hook it into the app. So I'd basically say, right, I'm cooking a chicken, so I'm going to go into the app and press chicken. Chicken would set it to however many degrees C it needs to be for when it's cooked. And then when it's reached that temperature, it would do an announcement through Google throughout the house and it will say, oh, your chicken's ready now, you can take it out the oven. So it's cool. A bit of a strange one, but that's quite a good one to show off to people.
Handy. So even if you're in the other room doing something else, whatever, you always, oh crap, run back and pull it out, right?
Totally.
That's handy.
I have a Weber barbecue, like a wireless meat thermometer, which is like the Weber brand barbecue, and I think it just transmits over like 433 megahertz or something. Same thing, right? Like you put the probes in, put the meat out on the barbecue, and it just transmits to this little receiver, and you select, chicken, beef, pork, temperature you want or whatever. I've always wanted to, just buy like a 433 megahertz receiver, integrate it with Home Assistant, but I've never actually thought of a use case. But the way you described it, if I could put in the temperature in Home Assistant and then have, like those announcements set, when the barbecue's done, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That might be another project to add to the list for this year.
Yeah, it's probably one that doesn't get used enough, really. It's one of those that you think, oh, it would be great, and then you got to use it, 4 or 5 times a year. But
yeah.
Probably one of the other ones is a really simple one. And I don't even know if you could call it an automation or such, but Xiaomi do the water leak sensors.
Yep.
So I've got a few of those. So we've got the water leak sensors in all of the bathrooms, in the kitchen, and underneath the washing machine in the utility room. And it's one of those where, you spend so much money on all of this stuff, don't you? And you never expect it to pay back, really. But actually, this one, to some extent, has, because it's saved us a couple of times, particularly on the freezer that's in the garage. So I've got one underneath the freezer door out in the garage. And actually, it went off a few months ago at like 11:30 at night, saying that there's a water leak. So I went out, and the freezer was defrosting, and we would have lost, a whole load of meat, probably 50 or 60 pounds worth. So that paid for those sensors, just for that one night, really.
Yeah, it's you know what? It's funny because as I buy those kind of sensors, or look at that, I've got a few of those. I've got a few SmartThings ones just scattered around the house, and every time it's like, do I need this? And then I was like, you know what? I really hope I waste the money on this because I don't want to have to deal with it, right? And like it's like,
I have used them for the other things as well. So I set it up as a rain sensor. I mean, I'm sure most people would say, well, just look out the window. But But I've connected one up where you can connect it to wires as well, and then put 2 wires in the guttering, and then when it's raining, it just connects those 2 wires together, and then sends me a notification and says, oh, hey, it's raining. So at least if you have left some washing out or something like that, then you get some early warning before it's too late, that it's raining and you need to bring the washing in.
Yeah, I never thought to put it in the gutter. That actually makes sense.
Yeah, well, it's been there for about 9 months now, and it's still working, thankfully. Over winter, obviously, the battery does degrade a bit quicker than the summer, but it's still lasted the winter and still going.
Yeah, because most of those are built to be waterproof anyways, right? So it's just a matter of, I guess, sticking it down and making sure it doesn't fly away in like a heavy breeze or something at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I did attach wires to it so that the sensor is inside and then the wires are in the guttering, but you could probably, just put the sensor itself in there.
Yeah, interesting.
I like the idea of using the wires. So I have one in my shower so that when it gets wet, it knows, that someone's in the shower and
So you know
not
the
to turn the
time.
lights off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, otherwise the motion sensor, times out after a certain amount of minutes, and then if you're in the shower, the lights turn off on you. But that way, once it detects water, okay, all right, don't turn the shower off until the water's cleared out. But the problem is that the sensor gets once there's water under the sensor, you need to really lift the sensor up to dry it out. So, naturally, it'll look like someone's in the shower all day unless you actually pick up the sensor and dry it out. But I like the idea of using wires, put them near the drain. That might be handy.
Why don't you just use a humidity sensor? Because if you're showering anyways, then
no. Well, I find that either the humidity sensor doesn't update frequently enough to conserve battery on that sensor, or because we've got the fan on or the exhaust fan on anyway, which is in the shower, the humidity doesn't rise enough to detect it. If that makes sense.
Okay.
And then same thing, once the humidity's up, it doesn't go down for a few hours anyway, for whatever reason.
Right.
Yeah, I think I had the same challenge, really. I tried that with the humidity. But what I do is I do use the humidity sensors. I do use it as part of the automation to turn the fan on. So one of our fans is where you have to actually turn it on manually, for it to extract. And so I just made that smart by saying, look, if the humidity is above a certain amount, then trigger this smart switch, which is connected to the fan, to turn that on in the bathroom.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yeah, so turn it on manually. What's that like? Okay.
I was picturing like you would have to pull the motor, like, like a lawnmower, like a starter yank or something.
That's funny.
I've got one more story about the water leak sensors, actually. So the classic one that you have it there in case there's a leak, heaven forbid. Well, I decided one day that I really needed to clean the plug hole out. So I was like, this is getting terrible, messy, So I'll clean it out properly. So I'll unscrew this a little bit, and clean it up, not realizing that it actually unscrewed the whole mechanism where the water goes down. So when I went to clear it, I started putting water down there and it was going all over the floor. And I got a phone call from Home Assistant saying there's a water leak detected in the bathroom. I was like, hold on, I'm in the bathroom. So I was like, oh no. So that actually probably saved me for a few minutes of flooding the bathroom as well when I realised what had happened.
That sounds painful. Yeah.
When you say you got a call from home, did it actually physically call your phone, or was it just on like the Google Assistant that yelled out to you?
Yeah. So I one of the integrations I use is Twilio. And I find that really handy because you can get it to call when there's really important things, So like when we leave the house, for example, it'll activate the alarms. And if it detects anything at home, then it will call both of our phones through Twilio and say, hey, look, the front door has been opened. You might want to check out your cameras.
Interesting. That's a good way of doing it.
Yeah, for critical notifications, right, where you need to get, someone's attention, not like a text message, not an in-app notification. You actually need, the attention of someone. A phone call is the best. Do you find Twilio is expensive for that purpose?
No, I think it's worth looking into. But I do actually pay for it now. I got something like £10 worth of free credits, and now I pay about £1 a month for the phone number. But I think £1 a month is pretty reasonable. And the phone calls are like, quarter of a pence or something. So I have one test call each month, which phones me on a Sunday, the first Sunday of each month, just to make sure everything's working okay and the integration's still working. And then all the others are just phone calls, if there's emergencies, not very often.
It's just to check in on you, make sure you're alive. And,
I always get surprised by it still, though. I'm like, Home Assistant's ringing me. What is it? It's like, it's just the test.
Every Sunday at 3 p.m., you're like, something's happening. Yeah.
That's interesting. I wonder, is it smart enough that you could punch in a code back to Home Assistant to say, yes, I've acknowledged this message?
Yes,
Is there
you
the
can
ability to do
actually.
that?
I haven't done much with it, but I have actually got it set up so that you can text Twilio back, and then it will make an API call back to Home Assistant. And at the moment, I've got it so that you can do, say, turn heating on through a text message, and then it will turn the heating
That's
on. Obviously,
cool.
you'd probably just use the app. There's not much point in that. But yeah, you definitely can do that.
Interesting.
Because you could do like, a distress call, right? Like, if the burglars come into your house, Home Assistant calls you and you have to put in a distress code, right? Say, no, something's not right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Yeah, to clear the alarm.
Yeah.
That is interesting.
And so you're just using the apps on your phone for presence, no other, do you use your alarm control panel for presence as well? Or is it just your app that you're tracking who's home?
We don't use the app for presence, to be honest with you. We've got quite a few things driven off presence detection. So I try to look for, the most accurate way possible, really, and there's a lot of different things out there, isn't there, of use multiple sensors to increase reliability, etc.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of them really get you, that 99%. The best thing I found, which I've used for probably about 2 years now, maybe a little bit longer, is I use iBeacons. So I use the Room Assistant add-on for Home Assistant, and that's on a few Raspberry Pis around the house. So I've got 3 set up around the house, and then they just detect iBeacons, one that's in my wallet, and then one that's in the missus' handbag. So, whenever we leave the house, I always take my wallet with me, and she always takes her handbag. So, the reason I like that as well is it's quite instant, really. So I set about a 1 minute timeout, so that after 1 minute, it knows that you've left.
Yeah.
And then when you get home again, as soon as it detects the iBeacon, which is, around about when you're in the garden or something like that, a bit further away maybe, then it knows you're home, and can trigger whatever you want it to trigger.
Interesting.
So are the iBeacons similar to like a tile, like a little Bluetooth tracker that you can just stick in your wallet or something?
Yeah, that's it. And they're fairly cheap. I think they're about £10 or so at the time or something. And they're similar to the Zigbee things, the battery life wise. They last a year or two, really. So you don't have to change them all the time. So yeah, I've just got one in my wallet, just on the outside of the wallet so that it gives better signal, and then one on the sort of handbag near the outside. And that does the job, really. And we don't think about it too much. Occasionally, if you get an issue with the Wi-Fi, then it might be a problem, because I'm using a couple of Raspberry Pi Zeros, which I found sometimes struggle to reconnect to the Wi-Fi if there is a problem. But other than that, it's really rock solid.
And the batteries are replaceable? You can replace them yourself?
Yeah, you can replace them just with the standard CR2032 batteries.
Yeah, that's perfect. I know, like with the tiles, I think you can set something up similar, but you can't have them linked to the tile app. So you basically have to have the tiles in pairing mode, which sort of is great. But then when a tile's out in the wild, like let's say you put a tile on your bike and you leave it in pairing mode for Home Assistant to detect, that means someone walking past with the tile app can't, find that tile for you. So,
so
it's a bit tricky, but I have them just set to the tile app and use the cloud interface for that.
Right. I mean, I quite like your way of doing it, Phil. I think you use Wi-Fi, don't you? I'd have probably opted for that if I didn't go with the iBeacon approach. It's just that I think sometimes the missus does turn off her Wi-Fi and use 4G instead or what have you for whatever reason. So I just felt that, if it was something in a bag that she didn't think about, then it was a bit better. I considered, the classic GPS and having an iBeacon as part of your phone app, because obviously that's got Bluetooth. But I found that because phones always try and save power, a lot of them, turn off every now and again to save power. It's really, really difficult to stop apps closing on their own and, work consistently. So I gave up on that approach.
I found the same thing with the Tile app. So my wife has an iPhone and she's got the Tile app on her phone, but if her battery gets too low, the iPhone will activate battery saving mode.
Yeah.
And when that mode is activated, the Tile app stops reporting locations.
Yeah, to save battery.
Exactly, yeah. And I think for whatever reason, once the phone's charged, the battery saver mode doesn't get deactivated. So it stays in battery saver mode until it gets turned off.
Really?
Maybe I'm just making that up, but
Okay,
there's a setting that needs to be flicked on.
I kind of feel like we need a super techie mode, for these phones where you can turn it on and say, look, I want these apps to do what they want when they want,
Yeah.
But that doesn't really
be cool,
exist.
actually. But the point, but then you kind of defeat the purpose of battery mode too.
Yeah.
Or battery
That's
save
true.
mode. But
So I suppose a lot of them are the standard things, when you leave the house, all the lights turn off, for example. I've got some things on some plugs as well. So one that was quite handy was the hair straighteners are on a plug. So I've got the Sonoff S26, I think it is, plug with Tasmotor flashed onto it.
mm-hmm.
And then that talks Home Assistant, and then I can turn that on and off. So when we leave the house, the hair straighteners always turn off because she has been known to leave them on before, and unfortunately we actually came home once and the robot Hoover had its way with the wire for it, and the hair straighteners were halfway across the room. So,
oh my god, yeah,
Don't they have like auto shut off now for that purpose? Like most of them would come with timers, I would have thought.
I think her latest ones do, to be fair. But yeah, I've still got the plug on there at the moment, though.
Yeah,
that's fair enough.
That's a really useful one that I never thought of because I have that exact problem at all. I think hers has an auto shut off one, but it's I don't know if I trust it. That's my issue.
Yeah. So the standard things turn off when you leave the house, and then when we come home, as I was saying, it detects when you're fairly close to home, really, within the garden or so. So then all the lights turn on so that we can see what we're doing, put the key in the door, etc.
Yeah.
But also things like the alarm system and the cameras, they trigger when we leave and when we come home. So I've got it set up so that when we leave at the moment, it makes an API call to Blue Iris and says, right, change the profile from home mode to away mode. And then the cameras start, recording. So when we're at home, it will just record in low definition. And then when we leave the house, it will record in high definition.
Right.
Particularly the one in the lounge.
Where are your cameras recording to? Like, are you pushing that up to the cloud, or have you got them recording just locally somewhere?
So I've got them recording locally at the moment. Because I didn't want to do it on a normal cloud service, but I do replicate some things to an FTP server as well. So nice. I was doing just images, but I've just upgraded our internet the other day actually, so that we could get more upload bandwidth, so that I can start uploading some video footage as well. So the plan is to upload some video footage going forwards as well.
Yeah, because I've always thought if I was to have cameras inside the house, if the day was to arrive that someone broke into the house, the first thing they're going to do, right, is they're going to see this big black box that's making a lot of noise and flashing lights. They're going to either turn it off straight away, or they're going to yank it, right, and take it with them. And in which case, they've got, terabytes of my data, but also all the video of them in the house, right? Yeah. So,
and you're at a few $100 too.
At least, right?
Yeah, mine's fairly hidden, to be honest. And like I say, it does upload some things to the cloud, and I do plan to upload more of it. But the one in the lounge is one that you don't really want to have recording when you're home, for privacy, even though it is all locked down. But when we leave the house, obviously you do want it to. So it turns on the lounge camera when we leave, and then it'll record.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then other things are door sensors and the motion sensors. So if we leave home and the front door is opened or the back door is open, then, it will make the Twilio phone call just like the water leak sensors do and say, hey, someone's at home, check it out.
The motion sensors, are they also those Xiaomi motion sensors?
Yeah, they are. I found them to be brilliant again. We don't really get any... Well, actually, I don't think I've ever had a false positive on them. I do make sure that we place them in areas, where the sun can't shine directly on them, just in case.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've been excellent. I've got some of the first generation ones, where they don't have the lux sensor.
Right, yes.
And then the second generation ones, the Akara ones, I think, they're brilliant because they've got a lux sensor as well, so you can actually detect how light it is in the room. Yep. So actually, instead of then detecting and saying, it's, it's now nighttime because the sun has set, you can actually say, well, is it dark in this room, so turn the lights on? So I kind of combine the two and say, well, is it nighttime, but also is it actually dark in the room? So that if you got, a really dull day, like you do in the UK quite a lot, then it will turn them on in the daytime as well.
Yeah, that's really nice. It's, for me right now, that's something I'm lacking. And I was looking at like getting some light sensors or lux sensors, right? Just to give that kind of variance. Because right now my automations are still, hey, okay, like whatever, it's this much before sunset, turn on the lights, so on and so forth, right? Which is sometimes a little, like you said, especially in winter, like if we have a really gloomy day, you're not going to get enough light or anything like that, right? So it's actually through the day. So I really like that. Maybe I should look at the Xiaomi ones then.
Yeah, that's what I love my Z-Wave multi-sensors, because they've got like the temperature, humidity, the lux sensor as well, right? As well as motion.
Is that the AOTech ones you have, Phil?
Yeah, I've got the 6-in-1s and the 4-in-1s. Yeah, they're brilliant. But I also have, because my curtains or blinds are automated, also have triggers so that if the blinds are closed, then the lights can come on. Because sometimes there's a delay in the lux reporting, because they only report every, like 60 seconds or 2 minutes, depending on if they're battery operated or not. So you don't want, the blinds to go down and be pitch black for a couple of minutes until the new light reading comes in.
Yeah.
That makes sense. The way the Xiaomi ones work is they send a lux reading every time they detect motion. So it is, every minute or so, but only when it detects motion.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess because they're waking up to send a signal anyway, they may as well just send up the payload over at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just a useful addition really to the normal lights turning on and off. We were talking about when we leave the house. So one thing that I really like actually is that our hoovers go off. So, I mean, we don't go out as much at the moment, obviously, but but when we do go out, we don't have to think about the hoovers going off. So about 20 minutes or so after we've left the house, then if the hoovers have not been off in the last 2 days, then they'll go off and do the hoovering so that when we come home, everything's been done. So I just do a look up against the state history there, to say when was the last time that these hoovers were running, and then if they've not been running in the last 2 days, then set them off.
And do you have automations to bring them home if you come home like within 30 minutes?
That's a good one. No, I don't. I mean, that's why I delayed it so that they don't start as soon as we leave, to be honest, because if you pop round the corner for some milk or something, then you don't really want them going off. But I suppose, I could do that and send them home.
What brand of vacuum cleaners do you have?
So I started off with an iRobot, the Roomba 980, which cost an arm and a leg, and I was told off for buying it. But it was fantastic, and I really don't regret it, and we've still got it. It's great. But then a couple of years later, particularly when we moved, when we got more space, we needed one for each floor really. So I got the Robo Rocks. I can't remember which model. I think it might be the S55 or something like that. Okay. The white ones, which have also got LiDAR. And, they were half the price of the iRobot one I bought, and they're just as good, really. So, really handy they are.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's insane though. Like when I first got mine, I have a 860 something like that, but it's right next to me here now. But it's it was so expensive, right? It was a few $100s. Like I think it was probably like $500 or something, $600, something like that. Now you look, there's the equivalent. Actually, even from iRobot, it's like half the price, right? It's like they've really come down in price.
Do you have the ability to set zones with these models? So I know like there's a Xiaomi one that is available, and you can see like the map of your house on your screen.
Yeah, that's what they are. So they are Xiaomi. The Robo Rock range, I think, is created by Xiaomi. You can do, but I think you have to go through the cloud for that, which is a bit unfortunate. And I've done the same again, that I've locked them down, so they can't talk to the internet, because I am one of those people where I, have the dream of locking it all down and nothing talking to the internet really. So obviously the Google Homes are my vice. But
Yeah, it's a bit creepy, right? You don't want your like vacuum cleaner just talking away while you're out, right?
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I think they're great.
That's awesome.
All right, so we were talking before how you're using, your Google Home and your scripts. What about like any announcements? I know I've got announcements for my dishwashers and washing machines. Do you use anything like that around your house?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So we have quite a few announcements. Some of them are triggered where you can actually ask it things, and then others are triggered based on the time of day. But I've kind of extended them a bit to make use of the PIRs. So, for example, on a Thursday, it's bin day or it's recycling day. I used to have it where it would just say at 5 p.m, "Hey, Mark, you need to put the recycling out." But I've changed that a bit now because, we might not be in or we might not be in the right room or what have you. So now it actually waits until we're in that room so that it will say when I'm in the kitchen, it will say, "Hey, Mark, it's time to put the bins out," because then I'm there by the back door, ready to go and do it.
So I had a very similar thing. I've basically used the Amazon Echo developer console to record the lady that shall not be named of her saying some snarky things about, the dishwasher's ready, you should go and empty it, or watch out, don't empty the dishwasher. Like if you open the dishwasher, I know you've opened it, like you'll know you have to put them away. My goal was to, encourage people that live with me, okay, my wife and anyone else that may be walking into the kitchen, to, actually want to empty the dishwasher instead of just leaving it sitting there clean and ready. But no, that didn't work, unfortunately.
Yeah.
All I get is every time I walk into the kitchen, I get an annoying announcement from the Amazon Echo lady saying, "Hey, your dishes are done, put them away."
That's right. Now she's just turned bitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so I do that for a couple of other things as well. So like reminders. So I've got in the Home Assistant app, I've got a thing where there's a pull down and a text box where you can type in what you want your reminder to be. And then when I come downstairs in the morning, it will trigger. So for example, if you want to take some meat out of the freezer, then you don't necessarily know what time you're going to come down. It might be 7 o'clock, it might be 8 o'clock or what have you, especially at the weekend. So when we go in the kitchen, then it will say, "Hey, Mark, take the meat out." So yeah, it's just using that sensor with the time of day. I just find the combination works really well for different things.
I like that. That's really nice.
Because it gets you when you're at that moment, right? Like the perfect time to remind you, as opposed to 5 minutes before where you're just going to put it in the back of your mind and forget about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I've got one for the water pressure as well. So you often have to top up your boiler or something with the water pressure if it drops down. So every few weeks I say, "Hey, check the water pressure," and make sure that goes off on the landing. Where the boiler is, so that I don't forget and just do it there and then. Really.
Have you thought about integrating things like Grossy's chore tracking to sort of, like mark things when they're being done, little jobs around the house?
Yeah, I have, and I've heard you guys talking about it, I think on the last podcast as well.
Yeah.
I downloaded it, God, it must be 6 months ago, and I even went to the extent of buying a scanner, and then I realised that I couldn't be bothered.
I like that. You went to all that effort to buy a scanner and all that, and they go, "Hang on, I can't be bothered doing this," and then just gave up. I like it.
You know what, Mark? It's so funny because I've done the exact same thing, right? Like I set up Grocery, I did all that stuff, and I was like, okay, it's a cool recipe repository, it's a cool whatever, right? You do all that your to-do list and whatnot, and then it's like, yeah, am I actually gonna do this? Am I gonna take an inventory of my fridge, whatever? I'm like, it's probably not gonna happen. It's probably not gonna happen the first time, let alone the 20th, 30th, 40th time, whatever.
Yeah. Having to keep it maintained.
Yeah, and I think that's the key to automation, isn't it, really? It's got to be as minimal effort as possible and as seamless as possible, hasn't it? Where it just happens, really, rather than you having to do things. And I think that's where I've moved towards, because I tried, the NFC tags like you, Phil, and I think there are some good use cases, obviously, for them. But at the same time, it's like remembering to do it, or particularly, again, someone else in your family saying, "Oh, remember when you do this, you need to tap this tag with your phone," and they'll just go, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to do it today."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've tried to move on to ones that are a bit more frictionless, really.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you had you had different ways of notifying, right? Between Twilio, between getting your Google Home to yell at you depending on the room you're in. How do you distinguish what goes where? Is it that more kind of emergency stuff or like super important things go to that go to your phone, essentially call you through Twilio, and everything else is kind of a little more mundane things? Or do you have some kind of like a formula for that, how you do things?
It just tends to be the thing that's closest to that Google Home, that it relates to. But I think one thing I've actually started using lately, which I didn't realize existed, which I think is great, is that, you can send notifications to your phone and it will do text to speech for you.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so I didn't realise this until a couple of months ago. So I've started transitioning some of mine now. Instead of figuring out what room, to broadcast the Google Home to or what have you, it actually goes directly to your phone and just speaks it out loud. So if it's in your pocket. So I've done that for the bin automation now. So wherever I am in the house on a Thursday, it will just say, "Hey, Mark, it's time to put the bins out," through my phone. And I've always got my phone on me. So yeah.
Interesting. And does that assume that while you're not on a phone call, while, things like what happens if you're walking around? Like, let's say you have your headphones in.
Mark's walking down on the public transport on the bus, and all of a sudden his phone says, "Mark, it's time to take the meat out."
Exactly, right? Like, there's that, right? And even that you can say, "Hey, go, like, if I'm at home, then do blah blah blah." But in the context of actually, like, again, you're on a phone call, right? I'm guessing, does that still push through? Does that not?
It's a good question. I don't know. I haven't looked into it enough. I mean, I literally set it up about a month ago, this one, and it's worked great. But, with the lockdown, we haven't really been anywhere. So I suppose I haven't tested out those scenarios. But yeah, it's something I should definitely look at.
That's cool. Yeah, that's that. I wonder if that's an Android thing or if that's on the iPhone app too. This is the first time I'm hearing about that, so that's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely worth looking at. I think it might only be Android because I think it uses the Google text to speech. I don't know how Home Assistant initiates it from that, but it does somehow. But yeah, that's really good. And then some of the other announcement ones I've set it up to call some APIs. So, for example, if I want to know when the next race of the Formula One is, I found that the Googles are not very good at telling you what's going on there or telling you what position they're in. So I just say, "Hey, tell me the Formula One," and it will trigger a script again in Home Assistant, and it will go off. It will find out the information, and then it will, give you the announcement back through the Googles and tell you the information.
That's pretty cool. So it's a proxy to see who's leading in the F1.
Yeah, basically. I was going to talk about the companion app a bit more, actually, because I actually don't use it very much. I talk to the Googles for most things, and I've got a lot of the Xiaomi buttons where, I will trigger things on and off through those. But the missus has a few key buttons that she uses all the time. And one of them is the toilet roll button.
Yeah.
So she's got a button on the app that says toilet roll, and there's 3 sliders that say, right, how many toilet rolls do we need for this bathroom? How many toilet rolls do you need for this one? And then when you press that, when I'm near downstairs where the toilet rolls are stored, it says that, "Hey, Mark, you need to get 1 toilet roll for this, 1 toilet roll for that," so that we don't get caught short.
That's funny. See, that is practicality at its finest.
Yeah. I was imagining like this Wallace and Gromit system would all of a sudden, start pulling up pulleys and this toilet roll, which start rolling up the stairs and landing in all the certain, bathrooms that they need to go to.
That would be cool. I did actually try and use the hoovers to move things around because, you can actually control these Robo-Rock hoovers. Obviously, they can't go up the stairs, but you can control them. I mean, it proved a bit too difficult in the end, but I do think in a few years' time, hoovers and things like that, you will be able to say, go to this part of the house, drop something on top of it, and then it will deliver it to you in your lounge, your next drink or something.
Yeah, why use legs at this point?
Wasn't there like a YouTube video of someone putting like beers on a Robo Rock or something and having them delivered around the house? Maybe like for a football game. Maybe
I think there might have been.
I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
I saw.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Rohan, I know that you've mentioned before about deep stack, and I'm afraid I'm not going to solve all your problems, that's for sure, but I've certainly started playing it with it myself. And it is quite cool. And I've actually bought one of the Jetson Nanos. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yes, those they look pretty slick for at least for what I'm doing for home, which is right now nothing. But how do you like it? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, I really like it. The main problem I had is I was running on the Intel NUC before, and I was trying to detect people, if they're in your front garden or what have you, to trigger motion and send you an alert. And that was working great, but because it's quite intensive on your computer, it wasn't sufficient. So that's why I bought the Jetson Nano and went that route instead, so it's a dedicated system for processing the images. And that works really well, actually. I did have to do a bit of playing around with some custom models because you do have different qualities, for different accuracy.
Yeah.
So there's a Home Assistant add-on. I don't know if you've looked at it for Deep Stack.
I just used a native image processing so far. I haven't looked at any of the modules or anything like that. So what's that do?
Well, at the moment, I would say it doesn't do a huge amount. So I just use it for detecting people and cars and things like that. The main one I do actually is an improvement to an existing automation. So I'm sure everyone's had the thing where you're waving your hands around at the PIR, trying to turn the light back on.
Yeah.
And in the lounge, that was getting a bit frustrating because I'd set it to 30 minutes, but the problem with that is then every time you leave the lounge, your light is left on, for 30 minutes when it doesn't really need to be. So we've got a camera in the lounge. So I thought, well, I know, we'll get it to take a picture every minute, process it, see if a person's sitting on the sofa. And then if they are, we can treat that as someone being in the lounge and therefore, leave the light on. So that's what I've done. And it seems to be working quite well at the moment. It's only been running for probably 5 or 6 weeks.
Okay. That's kind of cool. So you're basically doing people detection in there. So at that point, then, is it even worth having your motion detectors, your PIRs?
No, it's a good question. I would say so at the moment, just because it's got the lux sensors as well. And it also, I only do one every minute, whereas, the motion ones do happen immediately. As soon as you go past them, it will turn the light on. But I think the combination works quite well there, although the missus has already tried to combat that as well by wearing a blanket, which is a similar colour to the sofa, and then putting the iPad in front of her face.
Oh, that's funny. I love that she's actively trying to sabotage your automation.
Maybe you just need to get like a heat sensing camera and, if there's a human body in there.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, until she takes a portable heater and puts it next to her.
Yeah. Or wears a fire suit.
That's right. I feel like this is some kind of YouTube series where she's just going around trying to sabotage your things to make you feel like it doesn't work.
Brilliant. So yeah, with DeepStack, I suppose that's how far I've got really. I did look into the custom models that I know you've talked about of detecting other objects, but I feel like it's the next level up still at the moment, isn't it? Where it's really quite technical still, and you need a lot of different applications and lots of images to test it on. So I'm really hoping that in the next year, that'll evolve and you will be able to detect things like the DPD van outside your house.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I've been trying to. Again, I so right now I don't have any cameras outside. I'm going to be putting them in hopefully when it gets a little bit warmer. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but not at this rate. So the idea is, how can I stream that video? And exactly like you said, right? Is, hey, the Amazon delivery guy is here, or the UPS delivery guy is here, because even a lot of times, like even though we're home, like if I'm on a call or something like that with, like if I'm working, I have my notifications turned off, even on my Amazon Echo, things like that, right? So I don't see the, the ding dong, your box has arrived kind of thing, or your package is here kind of thing. And I try and silence the doorbell and such as well. And the idea is, hey, the ring will go off, it'll alert me of motion, and then I can just look on my phone. Realistically, when I'm focused on, talking to a customer or focused on doing whatever task, I sometimes I forget to look at my phone, and whatever package I don't want sitting out there all day, right? So
yeah.
At least that way, that's another thing to set some kind of another reminder. I run into the same problem in terms of how do I actually realize that there's something outside, but it's also about, hey, great, now based on that, start recording and make sure that there's no motion around it and things like that, right? That you can do.
Yeah, well, you can do it in conjunction with motion sensors, which are sometimes on the camera as well. So
yeah,
I've got the Anki C800, and they're created by the same company as Hikvision, I believe. So I think some people don't realize that you can use the Hikvision add-on and then use the functionality of the camera to tell you when, motion has been detected. So you can at least use that as your initial sensor in Home Assistant. And then you can use that to, to say to DeepStack, oh, can you take a photo now, please? Because I think I've got, something that might be a person.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, Mark, you mentioned before that you're using a DeepStack component. Was that something that you found like as an official add-on in like the Hass.io add-on store, or was it like a custom component that was available through Hacks? Because I know I've seen one in Hacks as a custom component that you can get from there.
I'm trying to think now. I think it was done by Marc Cole or something like that. He's quite heavily involved in the DeepStack stuff, and it does use the image processing component.
Yeah, so that's what I'm using. I haven't done a ton through it just because my I don't have my camera set up fully rigged up yet. So right now I'm just trying to dump a bunch of images, trying to get DeepStack to learn right now.
Yeah, I see.
I've still yet to figure out a way of getting a bunch of like how can I passively learn, right? Because that's one of those things I want to do too, is maybe just set up a camera, like just while I'm in testing mode, while the winter's still going on, set up a camera maybe near my desk or something like that. So it's looking at me and capturing maybe once a minute and saying, okay, this is like just understanding my face and whatnot, right?
That's a really cool idea, because DeepStack can do the face recognition as well, can't it? You can just send it a bunch of facial pictures. That's one thing I wanted to do, but I haven't really got a camera that is close enough to people to recognize them, if you know what I mean. Probably the one in the lounge, well, maybe. But I think the doorbell one would be good for that. But I don't have a doorbell that's hooked into Home Assistant because of the whole cloud thing. I think it's really difficult still to, find a doorbell that nicely integrates into Home Assistant that's locally controlled.
Yeah, and I mean, even if for me, for work, I know I have a laptop camera or whatever, but I normally keep my laptop underneath and whatever, clamshell mode or whatever, like just keep it shut, and I have my external keyboard, mouse, and monitor, and I've actually got an external camera on there as well. It's a nicer high def camera, but so maybe it's something like, I just have a script on my laptop just to take a picture. As creepy as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that sounds kind of creepy. And I'm pretty sure there's spyware that I can just download to do that for me. But yeah, so, it might be something like that, right? And naturally, when you turn your head and stuff, hopefully it gets different angles and that kind of thing, right? So even if it's the side of my face, it knows the side of my profile as me and things like that. Again, and the nice thing I like about this is it's all local, so I'm not as worried about me walking around the mall and I don't know, Google or somebody or Amazon being like, oh my God, he shops here. And I'm going to throw all of these ads at him or whatever that is. Right. So it's a little more private. So I'm a little more comfortable with that. So
yeah, I agree. Yeah. I think that's why I went for it really, because it's all local.
Yeah.
But like I say, I think it will probably take another year, but within the next year, I think that's really going to take off. There's already a lot of cameras, aren't there, that are doing person detection integrated into their systems, rather than having them separately.
Yeah, exactly.
And on the hardware itself, as opposed to having to be shipped off to the cloud, right?
Yeah.
That's true, yeah. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about, because you guys talked about it with Liam on the last podcast, and that was about the irrigation system side of things. Because this is something that I did a couple of years ago, and since I've moved, I've half set it up again, but I haven't had a chance to finish it off yet. And it was quite funny listening to, really, because likewise, a couple of years ago, I went on holiday, and at the hotel, I was like, oh, these sprinklers are really cool. They pop out the ground, they look brilliant. Yeah. And so I went on the internet and bought a few of them, and I've set them up at this house. But I had some set up at the old house as well. And they are activated via solenoids so that, when it's dry, when the soil's dry rather, then it will say, oh, okay, I need to turn the sprinklers on today if it's not going to rain. Mm-hmm. And then it will just automatically turn them on for 10, 20 minutes and then turn them off again.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's a good way of saving it too. So are these sensors built into the sprinkler, or is that just an extra sensor you just stick in the ground and you get a reading off of, or is it integrating in with weather?
MyFlora ones, the MyFlora sensors. They're not waterproof, but I just use some of the like plumber's waterproof stuff around them, and then they last the whole summer really like that because again they're just Bluetooth. The tricky thing, I suppose, is having a sensor that's close enough to them to be able to read it, because Bluetooth low energy, doesn't reach very far, does it?
Yeah. So do you just use like an ESP or something?
I used to have a Raspberry Pi in the garage. That's what I had. And I think I could do that here as well, really. So that's probably what I'll do. Although the ESP is a lot easier now, isn't it, with those MyFloras? So I did look at that a few weeks ago, and I couldn't get it working. And I remember you guys talking about it and saying, oh, it works great. And I thought, oh, what's wrong? And I realised that it was because the firmware was so old on the MyFloras that I had to update it, and then it started working.
Yeah, I love it. That's to me, that's one of those things that was my first kind of entry into the whole ESP space. Because again, it's I'm not a hardware guy in that sense by any means, right? Like I'm not like, oh yeah, I'm just going to put this together and build this out and do whatever. I'm starting to get more like that, but not yet. And that was one of those things. You just kind of plug it in and use ESP Home and push the firmware to it, and boom, off you go. It shows up, or you add it to Home Assistant, and everything is just there, right? Sensors get added and all that stuff. I just thought it was really slick. I mean, I still think it's really slick the way it's done. So,
how are you powering your garden? Like, are you using I think they're called rain machines or ratio? Like, have you got like an irrigation controller that you then hook into Home Assistant?
So I just bought, it was like a £10 solenoid valve that's 12 volts DC, and then I hooked it up to a Sonoff SB, so a 12 volt Sonoff, and had that in a box. I actually had that inside the garage, and then ran a waterproof wire out to the solenoid from there. And then, that's just in line with the hose, and then the hose goes all the way around to the front of the house, and then I've got the sprinklers embedded into the grass, and then they pop up and water them like that.
Interesting.
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, I looked at doing that in the summer, but just right before my backyard got done, and then they came in like a month before they were supposed to, so I never ended up getting the parts. And otherwise, I could also say I have a cool setup like that, but I can't.
I would say it's one of those worth doing. It does actually take quite a while in the really hot months, if you're watering it twice a day, if you really want nice grass, and doing the front and back can take a while. So it's quite a time saver. So I think it's worth doing because it's quite a fun project to do as well.
Yeah. Did you do it all yourself, or did you get somebody? And that's something I've been debating too. Is it easy enough that I can do it, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've had the luxury of doing it a couple of times, I suppose, now. So it was certainly trial and error, because the first time I had, the micro system feeding the plants, And then some of the plants at the end wouldn't get enough water. So I was like, all right, I've got to run more piping to them, So I've learned over time and bought a few different types of sprinklers. So I bought originally, the Rainbird ticker ones where they sort of make that noise.
Yeah.
And they were really good, but even more than one connected to the hose at the same time didn't have enough pressure for it to work properly. So I just had to try a few different others and make sure that there was sufficient water pressure, for it to water the whole garden.
Interesting. Okay. So there was a decent amount of trial and error that went into it.
Yeah, there was.
Okay. Okay, good to know.
So set aside a couple of days.
Yeah. All right. I think I should be able to do that. Let's see. Awesome.
Yeah, Marc, thank you so much. You've got an awesome setup.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
It's still evolving as always.
Kind of jealous. Yeah.
Marc, where can people reach out to you? You're on Reddit, Twitter?
Good question. My presence is not very good at the moment, but I'm definitely hoping to improve on that over the coming months. It's one of those, where you don't think your setup's very good until you get to a certain point and you think, oh, maybe it's okay. Yeah. And I'm just sort of getting to that point where I think I might reach out to people and start adding back to the community, like a lot of other great people do.
Nice.
Awesome. I'll look forward to it. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Rohan. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Glad you were able to make it.
If you want to share your Home Assistant journey or come on as a guest, reach out to us at feedback@hasspodcast.io. That's HASS podcast.io.
The Home Assistant podcast is hosted by Phil Hawthorne and myself, Rohan Karamandi. For links to topics that we discussed today, check out our show notes on hasspodcast.io.